In this video, we're going to show you how to replace all your car's fluids. We're talking engine oil, transmission fluid, transfer case fluid, coolant, brake fluid, power steering fluid, differential fluid, washer fluid, and we're even going to show you how to properly grease your car. So let's get to it. To replace all your car's fluids, the first thing you need to do is lift your car so you can work under it. If you have access to a car lift, you can use that to facilitate the process. But if you don't, we'll first show you how to lift your car on jack stands so you can safely work under it. The first thing you need to do is make sure your car is on solid, level ground. If it's not solid, like grass or dirt, your jack and jack stands can sink in the ground and become unstable and tip over. And if it's not level, your car can slide off, potentially causing severe injuries or worse. Even asphalt can cause problems as this gets soft on a hot day. So it's best to put some pieces of plywood under your jack and jack stands to spread the load and avoid damaging your asphalt driveway. Then make sure your emergency brake is engaged or your car is in park. Never work under your car with just a jack. Always put it on jack stands should the hydraulics of the jack fail. When putting your car on jack stands, you want to jack your car up on a central point near the front or rear so the front wheels or rear wheels get lifted simultaneously, like the rear differential, for example. You always want to lift the front or rear, not the left or right side. That's because lifting it sideways causes a much more dramatic incline, which could tip your car over. Lifting it lengthwise can never cause this and is much safer. You also want your car to be as flat as possible on the jack stands to reduce the risk of your car pushing the jack stands outward and sliding off. When choosing a spot to jack your car up from, be careful and use common sense. Not every flat metal surface is strong enough, like the oil pan, for example, which you'll just push through and break with ease. A chassis beam, on the other hand, is strong enough, but the catalytic converter and muffler are not. When in doubt, ask someone who has some experience for help. When jacking on the frame or a flat surface, it's best practice to use a block of wood to spread the load evenly and prevent damage or scratches from the metal jack. When you're jacking on a curved spot like the bottom of the differential or an axle, it's best to use something softer that follows the shape of the jacking point better, like this rubber pad. Then just slide your jack in position under the car. We're going to jack our car up on the rear differential, which is always strong enough. Lift the jack until it's right under the spot you want to jack and make some final adjustments so it's nicely centered. Then gently start lifting and avoid harsh, jerking motions that could cause your car to slide off. Always keep an eye on the spot you're jacking on. If anything starts sliding or bending, lower your car back down again. Lift your car until both wheels are from the ground and you've reached the desired height to work on your car. Then put your jack stands under either a solid part, like in our case the rear axle, or on the factory jacking points. You can find your car's specific jacking points in your owner's manual. These points are strong enough to lift your car up on, so you'll have no problem putting your jack stands there. Sometimes it's indicated by an arrow on your car's side skirts that points clearly to a jacking block, but most cars have reinforced pinch welds as a jacking point. These jacking points are specifically designed to be used with their emergency jacks, which have special bumps or slots to avoid sliding off or damaging the jacking point. But you can buy jack pad adapters for your specific vehicle or general pinch weld adapters to avoid damaging the pinch weld and causing rust. We'll put a link in the description below so you can easily find the type that fits your car. Don't go underneath your car to place your jack stands, only reach under it with your arms to be safe. And don't extend your jack stands all the way. Always stay one step away from the maximum height for safety reasons. To lower it, we need to lift the handle and turn clockwise on our high lift jack. But on most jacks, you just need to twist the handle counterclockwise to open the release valve and clockwise to close it again. Then gently release the pressure and lower your jack until the weight comes off. Don't drop your car on the jack stands. You can damage your car or it can jump off the jack stands. Instead, gently lower it. It requires a bit of feeling to do this correctly because sometimes the release valve sticks a bit, which makes you put more force on it until it jumps open and then it suddenly goes down faster than you want. When it's safely on jack stands, don't lower your jack all the way. Instead, position it right against the jacking point as an extra safety measure in case your jack stands fail. But don't lift the car with it, of course. And if you want to put the entire car on jack stands, just repeat the same process on the other side. A final tip that we'll give is if you need to raise your car quite a bit, don't do it in one go. First, put one side on a lower jacking position and then put the other side on a higher jacking position. And finally, change the lower jacking position to the higher jacking position. This way you'll avoid steep angles which can tip your jack stands over. To lower your car back down again, repeat the process but in the reverse order, working your way down in steps. Now that you can safely lift your car, it's time to start replacing your car's fluids. To change your oil, all you need are these simple tools to get the job done. First, you need a wrench with the right size socket so you can crack the oil drain plug. Then you'll need an oil filter wrench so you can take off the old oil filter and replace it with a new one, because you always need to change your oil filter when changing your oil. That's because the filter material inside starts to clog, preventing it from doing its job, which causes a lot more engine wear. Oil filters are affordable, engine rebuilds not so much. And of course, you need to change your old dirty oil with new oil, so check your owner's manual to see what type of oil you need for your specific vehicle. To make pouring easier and avoid making a mess, it's best to grab a funnel so you don't spill oil everywhere. And don't forget to wear nitrile gloves to protect your skin from the oil and chemicals. On top of that, we like to wear thick chemical gloves like these because they also protect against heat. You need to change your oil when it is still warm, but if it's warmer than expected, these will protect you from burning your hands on the hot oil. And when you're working under your car, we also advise you to wear a face shield to protect against hot fluid splashing in your face and eyes. And finally, there's only one more thing you need: a bucket or oil drain pan to catch the dirty oil so it doesn't spill onto the ground. The first thing you need to check on these is if the drain plug is open, and most importantly, what people sometimes forget is to open the vent. If you don't, oil might not drain fast enough and spill over the sides. Before you start, you first need to warm up the engine because this loosens up all the sludge and makes it easier to drain the oil and get all the impurities out. Before draining the oil, you want to loosen or remove the oil cap, which will make it drain quicker. Then locate your engine oil drain plug. This will be on the lowest point on the oil pan under the engine block, either on the bottom or on the side. When your drain plug is on the side, be careful because the oil will shoot out sideways, so make sure your oil drain pan is placed enough to the side but still under it, because the last bit will drip out straight down. Then grab your wrench and socket and crack the drain plug so you can loosen it further by hand. Here's a handy tip for you guys when putting on the thick gloves. Flip the bottom side up. This way, if oil runs down your glove, it gets caught in there and doesn't run down your arm. Next, loosen the drain plug further until it comes off. Try to take it out quickly when it's loose to reduce the splashing. Then let it drain all the way and reposition your drain pan if necessary when the oil flow changes. As you can see, our trick did its job perfectly and prevented oil from running down our arm. With all the oil drained from the engine, put the drain plug back in hand tight. Then wipe everything off with degreaser before tightening the drain plug with your wrench. But don't tighten it too hard or you'll risk stripping the threads. Before filling the engine with new oil, you first need to change the oil filter. It's a canister-shaped part, usually to the side of the engine block like here. The color may vary depending on the brand, but the shape is always the same. Make sure your oil drain pan is positioned underneath the filter because this will leak oil when you take it off. Sometimes you can twist it off by hand, but often you'll need an oil filter wrench so you can put some extra force on it. We like this type of oil filter wrench because when you slide it on and start to wrench, it automatically adjusts to the right size. Then just screw it off by hand and remove it. But keep the open side faced upwards to avoid spilling oil everywhere because the filter is still filled with oil. Before installing the new oil filter, you need to check if the rubber ring from the previous filter came off with it. If not, remove it from the engine, otherwise you won't have a good seal and you will have oil leaks. You can pre-fill the filter with oil, but it will spill out if your filter is installed at an angle, so you'll be limited to how much you can put in without it pouring out. Our filter is installed at an angle, so we're only going to put a small amount of oil in it. But what you should always do, even if you don't pre-fill your filter, is lube the O-ring. This will not only improve the seal, but it will make the oil filter easier to remove next oil change. Then install the oil filter again, but don't use the oil filter wrench to tighten it. Only tighten it as hard as you can by hand, nothing more. Then degrease the oil filter and write the amount of miles you changed the oil at on the filter with a paint marker. With the oil drain plug installed and the oil filter replaced, it's time to fill the engine with fresh oil. It's best to use a funnel to avoid spilling oil and creating a mess. Check your owner's manual to see which type of oil your vehicle needs and how much. Once you've filled it up with the approximate amount, remove the funnel and close the filler cap. Next, run your engine for a minute to circulate the oil and fill the oil filter. Keep an eye on the oil pressure or any oil warning lights. Then shut the engine off, let the oil settle for a couple of minutes, and check the oil level with the dipstick. As you can see, our oil level is perfect, at the top of the safe zone right below the do not overfill line. If your oil level is too low, add some oil, run your engine shortly, and check again. Changing your transmission fluid is super easy, and all you need are these common tools. You'll need a wrench with the right size socket to crack the fill and drain plug. Nitrile gloves because skin contact with transmission fluid and other chemicals is bad for your health. Then when you're crawling under your car, it's best to also wear a face shield to protect your face and eyes from hot fluid splashes. Then you'll need special manual transmission fluid and a pump with a tube to get the fluid into the transmission through the fill hole. On top of our nitrile gloves, we like to wear these thick chemical gloves because they also protect against heat. You need to change your transmission fluid when it is still hot, but if it's hotter than expected, these will protect you from burning your hands. You also need a bucket or oil drain pan to catch all the old transmission fluid in so it doesn't spill onto the ground. But make sure the drain plug is open, and what people often forget, also check if the vent is opened. Otherwise, fluid won't drain quick enough and it will spill over the sides. Lastly, it's best to use a torque wrench to tighten the bolts to the right spec so they don't leak and you don't accidentally over-tighten them. Before you start, you first need to go for a 30-minute drive to warm up the gearbox because this loosens up all the sludge and makes it easier to drain the transmission fluid and get all the impurities out. Then locate the transmission drain bolt. This is a large bolt located on the bottom of the transmission. You can find the exact location in your owner's manual. But before you take it out, first make sure you can open the fill bolt, which is usually to the side of the gearbox, about halfway up. Otherwise, you'll be in a lot of trouble when you have drained all the transmission fluid but can't fill it back up because you can't drive with an empty gearbox. And if you do, you'll destroy it in no time. But make sure to check your owner's manual and be careful. There are other bolts on the gearbox that are located on a similar spot but should not be removed. Then take your wrench and crack the fill bolt. But be careful when you take it out. If it's filled correctly, transmission fluid will drip out, so it's best to place some rags under there. Because our drain plug is located right on the edge of the skid plate and we don't want to spend an hour cleaning transmission fluid off of there, we're going to put some rags behind the drain plug so they block any transmission fluid from leaking on there. Place your oil drain pan under the drain plug and crack it loose. Then put on your face mask and chemical gloves because the transmission fluid might still be hot. Here's a handy tip for you guys when putting on the thick gloves. Flip the bottom side up. This way, if fluid runs down your glove, it gets caught in there and doesn't run down your arm. Then loosen it further by hand and try to take it out in a quick motion to avoid splashing fluid everywhere. Make sure to catch the old fluid in the container so you can afterwards drop it off at your local recycle center, mechanic, or even some parts stores because they recycle this for free. The rag behind the transmission drain bolt did its job perfectly and prevented fluid from splashing on the skid plate, saving us a lot of cleanup. As you can see, our glove trick did its job too and prevented fluid from running down our arm. The drain plug is often magnetic, which can give a great indication of your gearbox's health. If it's a metal paste without any big chunks, this is normal wear. But if you spread it out and can see bigger metal chunks, you might have some damaged teeth in your gearbox. Luckily, ours looks perfect. Then clean the metal shavings from the drain plug and put it back in. First, put it in hand tight and degrease the entire area, and then grab your torque wrench and tighten it to the right specs according to your vehicle's owner's manual. Then grab your transmission fluid and pump. Put the nozzle in the fill hole and start pumping. This might take a couple of minutes, but don't give up. You'll get there eventually. Keep pumping until you see the transmission fluid come back out of the fill hole. This is why your car needs to be level, otherwise you will put too much or too little fluid in the gearbox. Remove the tube and put the fill bolt back in, first hand tight and then with a wrench. If you don't have a torque wrench, be careful not to put too much force on it. You don't want to strip the threads. Then wipe clean. The last thing you need to do is go through all your gears so the fluid reaches all the parts of the transmission. Do this a couple of times and you're done. To change your differential fluid, all you need are these common tools. First, you need a wrench with the right size socket to crack the differential cover bolts. You'll need a plastic razor blade scraper to remove the old gasket material. And of course, you need a new gasket. We like to use a combination of both liquid gasket and a regular gasket to have a perfect seal. Make sure to wear nitrile gloves because skin contact with liquid seal or differential fluid is not good for your health. Then you'll need fresh differential fluid and a fluid pump with a tube to pump it into the differential through the fill hole. You also need a bucket or oil drain pan to catch all the old differential fluid in so it doesn't spill onto the ground. But be careful, a lot of people forget to check if the vent is open. If you don't open the vent, fluid won't drain quick enough and will spill over the side. Lastly, it's best to use a torque wrench to tighten the bolts to the right spec so they don't leak and you don't accidentally over-tighten them. For 95% of older vehicles, the differential is this large, round part of the axle and has a large cover with bolts all around and a fill plug almost halfway up. With rear-wheel drive cars, it's located on the rear axle, and four-wheel drive cars have one on both the front and rear axle. Because our rear differential is a lot harder to reach in film, we're going to demonstrate everything on the front differential. The process is exactly the same. Now, before you take out all the differential cover bolts and let the fluid drain, you first need to check if you can take out the fill plug. Otherwise, you can't fill it back up again when it's stuck. And with an empty differential, you can't even drive anywhere for help. Otherwise, the friction will overheat and destroy the gears in your differential. Our differential fill plug can be opened with a 1/2-inch wrench, but for some vehicles, you'll need an Allen key. Next, just remove it by hand. If it's filled correctly, there will be a bit of fluid dripping out. One thing you should also check is the back of the fill plug, which is often magnetic. As you can see, there's a layer of metal paste on there, but don't panic. That's normal. You should take a piece of paper and spread it out to see if there are any larger chunks in there, which is an indication that the teeth of the gears are damaged. It's a nice and even paste without any metal chunks, so this is perfect. Remove as much of the metal as possible. Put the fill plug back in and wipe the area. When taking off the differential cover, a lot of people let the top bolt loosely in there so the cover doesn't fall off. But we prefer to leave both top corner bolts in because with a single bolt, the cover might pivot and sling oil around, which might end up on the floor next to your oil drain pan, which can't happen with 2 bolts. When you've placed your oil drain pan under the differential, it's time to take the cover off and let it drain. First, loosen the 2 top corner bolts and then take out all the other bolts. Normally, nothing is going to happen yet as the cover will still stick to the gasket. If your differential cover has a regular gasket, chances are you can just hit it sideways a few times with a rubber mallet to vibrate it loose. And then normally the cover will come off without too much of a fight. But if your differential cover is sealed with liquid gasket, using this method probably won't cut it. You also don't want to hit it too hard or you'll risk denting the cover. The only way to get it off when it's stuck is by prying it loose with a flat chisel or screwdriver. You want to pry it loose at a hole because this outer edge isn't that important for the seal. So when you scratch it, you'll still have the inside part of the gasket that's going to give you a perfect seal. If you pry between the holes, you risk scratching the entire width of the contact area and, more importantly, bend the edge, which will ruin the seal. If you bend the edge of the hole, the bolt will just pull it flat, no problem. Then gently wedge the chisel in between there, keeping it flat to avoid scratches. We prefer a chisel over a screwdriver because a chisel is wider, which reduces the chance of damaging the contact area even further. Gently wiggle it in between there. You don't want to jam it in and damage the contact area. Then keep some tension on there while the silicone gasket slowly lets go. And just like that, it pops open. Keep it open until the majority of the fluid is out and then let it drain further while removing the last 2 bolts and taking the differential cover off. Before we can install a new gasket, we first need to remove as much of the old gasket as possible. To do so, you want to use a plastic razor blade scraper, never a metal one because you risk scratching the contact area, which will ruin the seal. After scraping off as much of the liquid gasket as possible with the plastic razor blade scraper, clean out the inside of the differential. Behind the bottom contact area, there's a lower point that doesn't drain and is still filled with about an inch of oil. Not only that, but all the sludge and metal shavings also gather there, so it's important that you clean this out as well. Just look at how dirty our rag gets from wiping the bottom of the differential. All that black stuff is metal shavings and gunk. Keep doing this until the majority of the oil is removed. Then grab some brake cleaner and spray it down, but try to avoid spraying on the gears themselves. You don't want to degrease them. Once the bottom of the differential is degreased, you should be able to take a fresh piece of paper and wipe across the bottom without any gunk or grease sticking to it. Now there's no oil dripping out anymore. We're going to put some extra effort in cleaning the contact area below the fill level with some sandpaper to make sure we don't have any leaks. With the differential itself cleaned, you need to repeat the same process on the differential cover. Clean off all the gunk and oil on the cover itself. You'd be surprised how much comes off. Then use the plastic razor blade scraper to remove as much of the old liquid gasket as possible. Sometimes it comes off without a fight. Other times you'll have to grab a piece of sandpaper and sand the surface smooth. It's important to have a flat contact area, otherwise the gasket won't be able to form a good seal. And if you don't have a perfect seal, you'll have a leaking differential. And the only way to fix a leaking differential is, you guessed it, do it all over again but better, so you have a perfect seal. That's why we like to do it properly the first time. Just look at that difference, from a dirty, gunked-up cover to one that will make a perfect seal. For the next steps, you'll have to work at a steady pace, because the RTV liquid seal will cure in about 5 to 10 minutes. Although it's not necessary to use RTV in a regular gasket at the same time, it helps to seal imperfect surfaces and can never harm the seal, so you can't go wrong with it. Some people say it's overkill, but we like the extra safety. This method has never failed us in the past. You want to apply a thin bead of RTV around the entire differential and around the holes. It doesn't need to look perfect. Just make sure everything is covered and you're not working too slow. Remember, you need to apply RTV to the other side too. Then stick the regular gasket onto the RTV and make sure the holes are lined up correctly. Differentials are usually not symmetrical, so make sure you have it on correctly. Then quickly do the same for the other side. A thin layer all around the cover and around the holes. With the RTV gasket in place, we need to quickly install the differential cover before the liquid gasket fully hardens. Again, make sure the cover is on correctly. The holes need to line up and the fill plug needs to be on the bottom half. First, put in 2 bolts on opposite sides so the holes are perfectly lined up and the cover stays in place. Then hand tighten all the other bolts. With all the bolts in place, tighten them with a wrench. When all the bolts are securely tightened, grab a torque wrench and torque them to the right specs as mentioned in your owner's manual. Then wipe off the excess RTV. By now, you'll probably notice that it's not that liquid anymore and really starting to cure. After letting it cure for another 15 minutes, it's time to fill it back up again with fresh differential fluid. Then open the fill plug again and grab your differential fluid and pump. Put the nozzle in the fill hole and start pumping. This might take a while, but keep going until you see it coming back out of the fill hole. This is why your car needs to be level when changing the fluids. Otherwise, the fluid level won't be right and you'll put too much or too little fluid in your car. And just like that, the differential is filled to the correct level. It's that easy. Put the fill plug back in hand tight and clean the excess fluid from the differential cover. Then tighten it with a torque wrench to the correct specs. Degrease the area and you're done. If your car has 4-wheel drive, you'll have a transfer case like on our Jeep. The transfer case allows you to switch between 2- and 4-wheel drive and is located between the rear drive shaft and the gearbox, with a drive shaft running to the front to power the front wheels. It's important to change your transfer case fluid regularly because over time, the old fluid will lose its viscosity and get saturated with metal particles, which prevents the fluid from properly lubricating the gears. If you keep driving like this, you'll eventually destroy the gears inside, causing your transfer case to fail. To change your transfer case fluid and prevent all this from happening, all you need is some basic tools. You'll need an Allen or hex key to remove the drain and fill plug, or a wrench with a hex bit, which is a lot faster and easier to use. You'll also need a torque wrench to correctly tighten the bolts again afterwards. And if the drain or fill plugs are really tight, you might need a breaker bar to break them loose. And finally, you'll need a fluid pump to fill the transfer case with fresh fluid. Before doing anything else, you always need to first check if you can open the fill plug. Otherwise, you'll drain the transfer case without being able to fill it back up, and you can't drive with an empty transfer case. The fill bolt was pretty stuck in there, but after some persuasion, we got it to move. And with the fill plug loose, we can now do the rest. On our Jeep, The transfer case is located above the skid plate, so to drain it, we're going to remove the plate to avoid making a mess on there. Before we can take the skid plate off, we got to make sure that either the drive shaft on this side is supported or that the gearbox on this side is supported. That's because they all normally are supported by the skid plate. And if we don't support that weight here or back there, it's all going to flex down, which isn't great and makes removing and installing the skid plate a lot harder. After supporting the weight, removing the 4 small bolts in the middle and 3 large bolts on each side, we can lower our skid plate and remove it. Then take out the fill plug. If your transfer case was filled correctly, it should slightly drip out, or the fluid level should be right below the edge of the fill hole, which you can check with your finger. With the fill plug removed, it's time to take out the drain plug. But make sure you have a catch can underneath it so the old fluid doesn't spill onto the ground. If the drain bolt is stuck and you can't get it loose with your wrench like in our case, you need to grab a breaker bar to get some extra leverage and break it loose. Then you can remove it further and take it out. After taking out the drain bolt, let it drain until it starts to drip and then close it back up again. Tighten the bolt to the right spec with a torque wrench and you're ready to fill the transfer case with fresh fluid. Put the fluid pump nozzle in the fill hole and start pumping. You can find the correct type of fluid your transfer case needs in your car's owner's manual, but usually it will be automatic transmission fluid. Then just keep pumping until fluid starts to come out of the fill hole. You can always check with your finger if the fluid level is really at the fill hole and it's not just a drop that leaked from the fluid pump nozzle. Put the fill plug back in hand tight and wipe off the excess fluid. Grab your torque wrench and tighten it to the correct specs as mentioned in your owner's manual. Finally, degrease the area and you're done. To bleed your brakes, all you need is a wrench to crack the bleeder valve, a bottle with a tube to catch all the brake fluid while bleeding the brakes, a large syringe or pump to extract the old fluid from the brake fluid reservoir, and finally you need fresh brake fluid. The reason you want to change your old brake fluid with new fluid is because it absorbs water, which will rust your brake lines and calipers from the inside out until your brakes fail. Another danger of water inside your brakes is that this will boil during intensive use, which creates gas. And because gas is compressible, you won't put force on your brakes, but instead compress the gas, which will prevent you from braking. It's important that you use the right type of brake fluid, so check your owner's manual or take a look at your brake fluid reservoir. Usually it's mentioned on there as well. However, in our case it says use only .3 brake fluid, so we need to use a fluid that's compatible with .3 brake fluid. .4 and .5.1 are both compatible, but never use .5 as this is a silicone-based fluid and will not work with glycol-based brake fluid like .3, 4, and 5.1. .5 brake fluid is only compatible with .5 fluid, so make sure you don't mix up the 5 and 5.1. If you're not sure what fluid the previous owner put in your car, you can quickly test this by taking a bit of the old fluid and mixing it with water. If it mixes, it's .3, 4, or 5.1. But if it floats on top of the water, it's .5. To bleed the brakes, you need to start at the wheels furthest away from the brake fluid reservoir. So first bleed the passenger side rear followed by the driver side rear. Next bleed the passenger side front and finally bleed the driver side front brake. Before opening the brake fluid reservoir, thoroughly clean the top side so no dirt or debris falls in when opening it. Then take the cap off and cover the surrounding area with rags or old towels. Remember, brake fluid is corrosive and will damage your paint if you spill it. Then take your pump or large syringe and extract all the old brake fluid from the reservoir. Try to get as much out of there as possible, along with the dirt or gunk that might have accumulated at the bottom. It's very important to get this last bit out as this is the lowest point where all the gunk accumulates. So get the tube in there until it hits the bottom and extract it. Unless your car is really old, your brake fluid reservoir will be divided in 2 parts. One half for the front brakes and one half for the rear brakes. So don't forget to empty the other side as well. With the old fluid removed, first fill it back up with new brake fluid so you don't pull air into the brake lines while bleeding the brakes. If you have difficulty seeing the fluid level, place a flashlight behind the reservoir. This will make it easier to see where the fluid is at. Then wipe off any fluid you might have spilled and close it back up so the brake fluid doesn't get exposed to the humid air and absorb moisture. Now locate the bleeder valve on your brakes. It's going to be located on the inside of your wheels at either the top of the drum brake or if your car has brake calipers at the top of those. Now it's time to bleed your brakes in the order we mentioned before. starting with the furthest from the brake fluid reservoir. Replacing the fluid in the reservoir alone is not enough. You also need to flush the old fluid out of your brake lines. Take the protective cap off the bleeder valve and put a wrench on it. You can use a special adapter to fit a tube or just put a correct size tube on directly. Then have someone sit in the car ready to press the brake when you say so. Tell the other person to press the brake while you're opening the bleeder valve. Let some fluid pass through and close the valve again before you tell the other person to release the pedal. Keep doing this until the fluid is nice and clear and no air bubbles come out. This brake caliper was recently replaced, which is why the fluid looked nice from the beginning. But when you look at this old drum brake, for example, you can clearly see a big difference in color between the old and new fluid. Remember to frequently check your brake fluid reservoir so it doesn't run dry or you'll be pushing air in your brake lines. When you see nice and clear fluid after bleeding the brakes for about 10 to 20 times, depending on how long the brake line is, close it back up again. Then disconnect the tube and clean everything off with brake cleaner. Because remember, brake fluid is corrosive and will damage paint and corrode metal. And don't forget to clean your wheels below the brakes. Often brake fluid leaks on there and will damage the paint if you don't clean it. We like to spray some WD-40 in the protective cap so it protects better against corrosion. With everything installed and clean, the only thing left to do now is fill the brake fluid reservoir back up again. So grab the correct type of brake fluid compatible with the old fluid and fill it to the full indication. Finally, wipe off any drops you might have spilled and you're done. When you go for a test drive, check if you have a firm pedal and you're not pulling to one side when braking. To change your power steering fluid, all you need are these common tools. You'll need a fluid pump to pump the old fluid out and a funnel to put the new fluid in. And of course, you'll need new power steering fluid. The reason you want to change your power steering fluid is because over time it will get saturated with impurities. By changing the power steering fluid, you remove these impurities and drastically increase the life expectancy of your power steering pump. You can find the correct type of power steering fluid in your owner's manual, so make sure you verify this. Finally, you'll need a jack and jack stands to easily change the power steering fluid. Or if you don't have those, we're going to show you a super easy trick with 2 pieces of cardboard that works just as good, so stay tuned. The first step is to locate the power steering fluid reservoir. It's usually located under the hood on the driver's side, and it's indicated by a steering wheel symbol. If you're not sure you've got the right one, you can always look up its location in your owner's manual. Before opening the reservoir, always wipe everything down so no dirt or debris can fall in. Then remove the cap and check if the opening is clear. Some cars have a little filter that you need to take out before you can access the power steering fluid. Then grab a cup or container and your fluid pump and pump the old power steering fluid out. We're going to save the fluid in transparent cups each time we pump it out so we can show you afterwards. And with the old fluid out, just look at the difference with the new fluid we're going to put in. The old fluid is dark and murky instead of transparent because of all the contaminants it absorbed. Although the reservoir is empty now, there is still fluid in the power steering pump itself and in the hoses. We're going to show you the easiest way to refresh that fluid without completely flushing your power steering pump. If you do want to flush it, we'll show you this in a separate video. You can click the pop-up or go to the description below where we've put a link to the video. But if you change your fluids regularly, you normally don't ever need to do a full flush. Put a funnel in and fill the reservoir with fresh fluid. After putting the cap back on, it's time to mix the old and new fluid. If you have a jack and jack stands, put your car on those and make sure you can turn your wheels all the way left and right. If you can't put your car up on jack stands, grab 2 pieces of cardboard that are a bit larger than the contact area of your wheel and place them stacked on each other in front of your wheel. Do this on the other side as well and drive on them. Now you can easily turn your wheels left and right. The cardboard reduces friction a lot and prevents wear or damage to the tires and ground. With the new fluid in the reservoir, turn the wheels all the way left and all the way right a couple of times so the old fluid mixes with the new. Then pump the slightly cleaner fluid out and fill it back up again with fresh fluid so you can repeat the process. Each time you fill the reservoir, circulate it, pump it out, and fill it with new fluid, you dilute the old, contaminated power steering fluid until it's pretty much fresh fluid. You want to do this until the fluid that you pump out is very close in color to the new fluid. As you can see, we did it 3 times and each time the fluid we pumped out got closer in color to the new fluid. And when the color is almost matching like in this case, you can fill it one last time with fresh fluid and close it up again. but make sure your fluid is topped to the full line. If you have a dipstick like ours, make sure you fill it to the cold full indication, not the hot full. That's all there is to it. The reason you want to change your engine coolant is because your coolant not only prevents your engine from overheating when running and from freezing when stationary in winter, it also protects against corrosion. Your radiator, water pump, and heater core all will work better and last a lot longer by doing a regular coolant change. And remember, changing coolant is cheap and easy. Replacing a damaged cooling system is not. And all you need to change your engine coolant is fresh coolant and something to catch the old fluid in. If you have a low car, you can use one of these oven trays to catch the old coolant in, or if you have a higher car like our Jeep, you can use an old jug with a funnel to catch it in directly. Before you start, it's very important that you first make sure the engine is cool. Otherwise, if you take the cap off, you'll have boiling hot coolant spraying out, burning your hands and face. That's because the cooling system and radiator are pressurized when hot. So be careful. You can get seriously injured. Then open the metal radiator cap on top of the radiator if your car still has one, and the plastic expansion reservoir cap on newer vehicles so the coolant will drain quicker. To drain the coolant, you need to open the drain valve, which is located on the bottom side of the radiator, usually to the side. It's going to be a plastic valve that can either be screwed open by hand, like in our case, or it has a plastic bolt that you need to loosen with a wrench. If your radiator does not have a drain valve, you need to disconnect the bottom radiator hose to drain it. Simply grab some tongue and groove pliers and squeeze these tabs together to loosen the clamp. Then slide it off and take off the bottom radiator hose to drain the fluid. That's all there is to it. Before opening the drain valve, place a catch can underneath it so you don't spill the coolant on the ground. Then open it to let the fluid drain. If it's a bit stuck from sitting, gently use some pliers to get it loose and then open it further by hand. This method won't drain all the coolant from the engine and is meant as regular maintenance, not a complete flush. But if you do this at your car's recommended intervals, which you can find in your owner's manual, you won't need to do a flush. The older your coolant is, the more gunk can accumulate at the bottom. So if the drain valve seems a bit clogged, bend a piece of electrical or metal wire and pry in the hole to free it up. Then let it drain all the way. It's best to keep an eye on your catch can because there might be more coolant coming out than your jug can hold, and you don't want it overflowing all over the ground. With the old fluid drained and the drain valve closed, it's time to fill it with fresh coolant. Remove the radiator cap completely and put a funnel in to make pouring easier. When choosing a coolant, remember that there are two different kinds. There are concentrates that you first need to dilute and mix yourself before using, and there are ready-to-use pre-mixed coolants like the one we use. If you're pouring directly into the radiator like on our Jeep, fill it until the fluid reaches the neck of the fill hole. On modern cars that don't have a metal radiator cap, you'll only have to fill it through the plastic expansion reservoir until it reaches the full mark indicated on the side. On our Jeep, we have both, so we need to add fluid to the expansion reservoir as well. To make the fluid level easier to see, you can place a flashlight behind the reservoir. Then open it and put a funnel in there to make pouring the coolant easier. Fill it until it reaches the full line and then close it back up again. Now you need to purge the air from your cooling system. Start your engine and put the heater to max heat. Then let it run for about 20 minutes or go for a short drive. A good indication that there's still air in your system is if your heater does not blow warm air, so make sure to check this. Then shut your engine off and let it cool down for half an hour. Finally, add more fluid if necessary and you're done. You should always change your washer fluid before winter, especially if you live in colder areas. That's because regular washer fluid might freeze, and if the fluid freezes, it expands, which can crack your reservoir, pump, connector pieces, and washer fluid nozzle. Another problem of regular washer fluid is that if you use it while driving in freezing temperatures, it will freeze on your windshield and reduce visibility. To avoid all these problems, you need to change your washer fluid. First, locate the reservoir, which is indicated by the symbol of a windshield with the washer fluid spraying out. Don't put it in other reservoirs, and if you're not sure, you can always check your owner's manual. Then open the reservoir and grab a fluid pump like this or any other fluid extractor. Doesn't matter. Put the pump as far in the reservoir as you can and pump the fluid out. It's super fast and easy. Then fill it with washer fluid that contains antifreeze and is rated for temperatures well below your coldest temperatures during winter. A lot of winter washer fluids go as low as minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit, while regular ones may only protect to plus 32 degrees. So make sure you pick the right one suited for your climate. And with the washer fluid topped to the full line, there's only one more thing to do. Spray a few times so the old, non-antifreeze fluid in the lines gets replaced with the new fluid. Greasing your suspension and steering components is an important part of your car's maintenance, which reduces wear and increases its life expectancy. Most modern cars don't have grease points anymore, so we're going to demonstrate this on our Jeep, which has several grease points. This will give you an idea where you can usually find them. Then turn your wheel to the outside of the side you're working on to get easier access, or remove the wheel entirely depending on how much room you have. When looking at the suspension, you want to look for ball joints and other grease fittings. As you can see here, there's a grease fitting at the top, but not every car has the same grease points, so yours might not have one here. Then wipe off the grease fitting so you don't pump dirt in there. Push the grease gun adapter on and start pumping. Keep pumping until grease comes out and the color changes from dark to the color of the new grease. The idea is that you try to flush as much of the old, contaminated grease out as possible. When the majority of grease coming out is fresh, you can stop pumping. Then wipe the excess grease off. It's that simple. Another very common grease point is at the tie rod ends, which you'll find on both sides. Again, wipe off the sand and put the grease gun adapter on. Flush out the old grease and wipe off. And while you're working on the ball joints near the wheels and brakes, don't mistake the brake bleeder valve for a grease fitting. Although you won't be able to get anything in there without cracking the bleeder open, it's best not to try your luck. Your car might also have some other grease points on the front suspension, which are easy to find. Just look for the connected ends of the steering assembly. You'll see a rubber boot that needs to be filled with grease and a grease fitting on the other side. And if you're not sure, you can always look up the grease points for your specific vehicle. Wipe the dirt off and flush the old grease out. Remove the excess grease and you're done. Over time, the rubber boots might crack or tear, so make sure to check this. If they're broken like this one, you'll have to replace them, but we'll show you that in a separate video. If you're unlucky and the boot sticks and refuses to purge, which can sometimes happen if it's older, you want to try and wiggle a dull screwdriver along the thick edge to unstick it. Then massage it a bit to push the excess grease out. If you leave it overfilled, it will tear easier and might even burst, so make sure you don't leave it like that. And finally, the last place you should check is the drive shaft. At each end of the drive shaft is a U-joint, and unless you have a sealed drive shaft like ours, you're going to have a grease fitting near the edge of the U-joint or in the middle of it. So make sure to check this. That's all there is to it. Now you know how to replace all your car's fluids and save tons of money doing it yourself. Thanks for watching. More videos are on the way, so be sure to like, comment, and share this video. It really helps us out a lot. Our content wouldn't be possible without the amazing support of our patrons and YouTube channel members, whose crew you can join via the links in the description to see our schedule, vote on future videos, get behind-the-scenes sneak peeks, and much more. This is Classic Car Maintenance, and we'll see you on the next one.